All right, so we're going to talk about lane control. What do I mean by lane control? We're talking about methods by which you can avoid getting hit by your opponent. And I'm going to angle this down just a little more so you can hopefully cancel out some of the glare. Okay, so broadly speaking, there are two lanes. A lot of people talk about quadrants. We can get into that a little later if folks want to, but for now we'll talk about lanes. There's the inside lane and the outside lane. The inside lane is the finger side of your opponent's sword or your sword. So right now, I'm attacking Ephraim's inside lane. Ephraim, do you want to step towards the camera a little bit? So, inside lane. If I'm on the knuckle side of his sword, I'm attacking his outside lane. Kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right, and if I'm on his outside lane and we're hand matched, he is on my
inside lane.
Fantastic. All right, if we are cross-handed, I attack his inside lane, he is also on my inside lane. If I attack his outside lane, he's on my outside lane. Pretty simple, right?
Straightforward to me.
All right, so we're going to be talking about a couple of different types of shots. We're going to not spend too much time on that. We're going to focus a lot more on lane theory and how to apply that to not getting hit. But just to make sure we're all talking about the same shot at the same time, when I talk or say flat wrap, what I'm talking about is I'm turning my palm down and forming a V, generally speaking, towards the outside or to the inside and trying to put myself into a blocking position. Reverse wrap is the same thing, but palm up.
Could you do them a little slower? Because I don't think your computer or your camera can keep up with the speed you're throwing them at. So it's really hard for us to actually see what you're doing.
So basically it's palm up
Yeah.
for a reverse wrap or palm down for a flat wrap.
Cool. Just, yeah, the camera wasn't keeping up with your motion.
All right. Well, we'll try to go with end states rather than motion. Hopefully the motion's a little obvious. I can go through slowly if we need it. Yeah, it turns out my camera's a lot crappier than I thought. Okay. So first way to do a lane control is positionally. And that's by far my preferred method. What that means is to move yourself and your equipment such that your opponent can't hit you. So from right here, I can pretty readily attack Ephraim's inside lane, right? Like with a chop, I'm just about getting it. If I do a little bit of a reverse wrap, I can pretty reliably land the shot, right? It doesn't take a lot. Versus if he moves his hand over, turns his palm up just a touch, try to block the inside lane. There we go. I can no longer get there without doing a significant change to my position, right? Can everybody kind of see what I did, or the way he moved his hand, or do I need to shift?
Shift a little bit. The light from the window is like distracting better.
Yeah, let's move everything around. That glare is real bad, isn't it?
Yeah.
There we go. Show you my fireplace instead. Better. It's gonna be cramped, but just pretend we're further apart than we are. Okay. So,
if you want to shift the testicles, you are off the camera altogether, other than your sword.
there
awesome.
we go. Okay. So can everyone tell what everyone's sword position is right now? He's got his hand across his body.
Yep.
And it's tilted out a little bit. Basically, he's forming a diagonal plane, kind of like this. And from there, matter of fact, go ahead and hit me with that lane shot. Nice and slow. Oh, that way they can see what's going on. See, I've got the inside lane closed. In doing this, I sacrificed all control of the outside lane, right? If it turned out he was lying and he was swinging to the outside lane, it's just wide open, right? So there are limitations to using your hand to achieve lane control. Another option is from here. You're gonna have to take a bit of a step back so I can move. Okay. So if I want to stop him from attacking the inside lane, right now he's got a pretty decent sized inside lane target available. You can't hit it with an easy chop, But if he straightens the sword out a little bit, he can get there with a chop. It wouldn't take much of a wrap to achieve it. So what I can do is I can step offline and back a bit. And what that did, could everybody see the change? I went back into the side. What that did was it shrunk the lane from his perspective without moving my hand. So now if he attacks the inside lane, he's going to have to extend really far and really hard to get there. So it becomes a much more obvious shot, right? So if we start out in our normal position, where we're normally attacking, if he attacks it, it doesn't take a lot. It's a fairly small shot, and it's really easy for him to change shots midstream. He can fake it or fake me out, lie to me. So from here, if I use my hand to block the shot, and it turns out he's lying, he can fairly readily make it a lie and redirect the shot and hit me someplace else. If I take that step and change my position, then that same shallow shot gets nowhere. He's going to have to throw a much deeper shot to actually hit me. At that point, easier read. His tells are going to be a lot broader, and he's going to commit it a whole lot harder, which means if he really does commit to it, he really wants the shot. First off, I have a lot less work to do blocking, and second off, I'm a lot more sure that that's the correct shot to block. Does that all make sense?
Sounds good. Good to me.
Yeah, makes sense.
Fantastic. Okay. So, generally speaking, ideally you want to step away from the threat. So if he's attacking the outside lane, I'm going to step away from that outside lane, right? So I'm going to kick up my back foot. I'm going to step off to the side, and then try to catch back up on my front foot. So I'm basically stepping off camera. So if he's attacking the inside lane, ideally I would want to be able to hop back this way, but unfortunately physics isn't. So generally, if my opponent's attacking the inside lane, I'll still step offline from time to time, but a lot of times I'll just step straight back to try to shrink the lane as much as possible to dive the access to my body. If your opponent is really good about committing hard and getting really close really fast, like my giant lanky brother is, if you can't tell, he's right next to me. He's like half a foot taller than I am, and despite the fact that his shoulder is 4 inches above mine, his fingers dangle 2 inches below mine. So against a fighter like this, once I'm comfortable reading his shots and reading his attacks, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll try to cut his angle by advancing. So if he steps into attack, knowing that he can close that distance and hit my body pretty readily, because he's just a lanky bastard. Cut that angle. And from here, suddenly, how big is my inside lane from his perspective? It's pretty small because I stepped offline towards it. I used his lengthiness against him and was able to cut off his attack with a lot less effort than trying to back off, finding out that his arms are 6 inches longer than mine, and having to swing my sword clear across my body to keep safe. There is a time and a place to step in. Just it requires a lot of careful reading and very careful. All right. So stepping offline and stepping backwards are the two primary, and every now and then stepping in. All right. Next thing I wanted to talk was momentum-based lane control. That one's all about using your relative motions to. I'm going to talk through this one, and we're going to try to show you. Can't promise it's going to show up on this camera because the frame rate's really awful. So we will do our best. What I mean by momentum-based is I'm using my motion relative to his to prevent him from attacking, or preventing his attack from being successful. So if we're very slowly, like a dinosaur speed, I'm advancing on him, he's retreating, trying to maintain distance. And if I sense that he's about to try to attack me, or I read an attack, or what I'll do is convince him to keep moving backwards, and I'll stop moving. And his relative motion will carry him out of range, right? Or if I'm retreating, he's advancing, and I read the attack, I convince him to stop moving his feet and throw, and I keep moving, then I can carry myself out of range. The advantage there is you are not using your equipment to stop his attack from landing. you're using relative positions and momentum to keep his attack from landing. And what that means is you can then use your equipment to attack him back. So if I'm using my sword to block, I've committed my sword to defense, right? Which means that my next motion has to be an attack, right? There's a delay between encountering his equipment and threatening him back. Versus if I convince him to throw, stopping his motion, and I keep my motion going, I have about a quarter of a second where I can throw an attack at him while I'm still in range before I carry it out of range before his attack lands. Requires very careful timing and very careful setup. Very high risk, but it's also very high reward. I personally don't like it because it's very risky, but a lot of people have a lot of success with it. Many warlords have been made using that type of timing strategy. All that makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're going to go over a drill that I really like. This one helps demonstrate the positional land control. I don't have a lot of drills for the momentum-based land control. That's something you got to. The best way I've found to do it is just experiment with it while you're sparring with a partner of approximately equal skill level. If anybody ever does come up with a drill, I would love to hear about it. We'll talk about the lane or the positional lane control right now. And this one's going to be almost purely hand position rather than foot position. It's a variant of block strike. What we're going to do is we're going to line up approximately one sword length between our sword toes. We're going to be a bit closer than that so you can actually see what we're doing. And hopefully all of our hands are in frame. Yeah, we should be good. Okay, so we're going to line up in guard, and we're going to throw an attack. One of us is going to open. It's going to be him this time. He's going to throw a shot, and I'm going to block it. And once I block that shot, we're going to pause. At the moment of impact, like notice his sword is still in contact with my hand, right? He threw a shot, I blocked it. As soon as the block happened, we both froze in place. So the next thing we do is we take a look at what did I give up in order to block this shot. So I established control of the inside lane because he threw it the inside lane by moving my hand across my body, right? But I gave up almost total control of the outside lane. So if it turned out he was lying, my outside lane is wide open. But he wasn't lying, so I caught the block. Now we take a look at where his hand position is and where his body position is. And his hand and his sword at this point, because his body position is not going to change because it's block strike. So, what control did he give up by throwing this shot? Anybody?
Outside
can't-
lane.
Yeah, okay. It's like, I'm not going to answer every question, guys.
Why not?
Outside lane.
He's also
Yeah.
open from above.
He opened from above, which is hard for him not to do because he's 6'1,000,000. But he actually gave up control of the inside lane. It's hard to see from the camera angle. Let's see if we can turn a little bit. It'll be a little more. See how his hand is well outside of his body and his sword is tilted to the end or tilted inward. I guess you can't really take a step back and up against the fireplace. But yeah, he's got really good control of the outside lane right now because his hand is squarely in the middle of it. I can get to little bits of it up top, maybe underneath if I really, really reach. I really wish I had a wider camera angle because you could see me leaning and doing awkward positions to get there. But he's got his hand squarely in the way of my easy return shots. All right, let's go ahead and square back up. So he gave up control of the inside lane, but based on where he attacked, he prevented me from attacking the inside lane. In order to get to the inside lane, I'd have to somehow magically get my sword through his, right? So he hasn't forced me to attack the outside lane, but he's made it very difficult to do anything else. And he's put his hand in the outside. So he's given up control of the inside, but he's taken control of the outside, and he's pushed me into the outside. So neither one of us has a very good shot right now. But on the other hand, I don't have a good shot against him. So the next step is to be absolutely brutally honest with yourself about what you're going to do next. Like, obviously, I know that if I do a hook stab, I've got a pretty good chance at landing it, right? But that's because I've stood here for like 5 minutes looked at him, and looked at where he's standing, and looked at what where his hand's at, where his motion is at, and I've had plenty of time to think. I know me, and I know in a real fight, I'm probably going to smack the top of his knuckles. So I want to show him a shot to the top of his arm. I want him to pull his arm back. I want to get his point away from my body. But I also don't want to get my hand anywhere out of the way, right? I want to keep it in the way because I don't know what he's going to do. My panic throw is always right here. And since he got to open, my second shot is almost always going to be a really shallow, really safe shot to something easy to get out. So from here, shot right there, and now we pause. So, does he still have control of the outside lane? He sure does. Do I still have control of the inside lane? I still kind of do, but it's a lot weaker. So, my hand was here, totally shutting down any kind of inside lane shots he's got. And in order to attack, I've moved it forward and opened up some more, but I've also forced his hand back and further to the outside, so that he has a harder time getting to it. So I feel like I'm pretty safe in moving my hand somewhat out of the inside lane. The other thing I've done is notice the position of my hand relative to where it was. It was up here for the block. Now it's a lot lower down, right? What that does is it makes sure my arm stays cut off because all of my arm is behind my sword. But this back body right here is now a little bit exposed. So you might feel like he's got a shot at swinging back here. And hopefully that entices him to throw that really deep back body shot, which is a really trivial block from here, and extends his arm out. Like, see how far out his arm extended? I tricked him into throwing a really deep, really risky shot in order to get an easy chop to the outside of his arm. Once you reach that sort of a point, that's what I like to think of as a checkmate. Basically, no matter what he does, he's screwed. If I screw up the shot, then he survives. If I don't screw up the shot, he's done. Or at least his arm is done. That said, it's perfectly okay for block strike to get to a position where you would say, you know what, in a real fight, I would not throw here, I would reset. And at that point, you reset the drill. Ideally, you change whoever leads off the shot. So, for example, go ahead and lead that or throw that opener again. Okay, and then I would return over here, right? And at this point, in a real fight, you're probably pretty well done because you know that this back body is silly and there's no real arm shot, so you would reset, right? Sure. So at that point, okay, yeah, we reset, back up, shake it out, and now it's my turn to open. That makes sense? Kind of wish we could kind of,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah, it seems like a good drill to do.
yeah, let me see if I can get on the, hey, you know what, I'm not going to figure it out. That's too complicated. All right, just FYI, I am not on the text channel because I can't figure out how to do that. So, where was I? I lost my place. We finished resetting the drill. Resetting drill, there we go. So, this drill is good for about 5 or 10 minutes tops. If you're doing more than that, you're really not getting a whole lot out of it, at least not that same day. Where I find the most utility with it, Warlord McFlurry is probably not going to need this drill. Warlord McFlurry already has some way of thinking about it and some way of figuring out how to keep himself safe, so it's somewhat less critical for them. For beginning fighters and intermediate fighters who've been at it, 3 to 5 years or so, this drill can be really valuable, especially if you're working out how somebody's killing you regularly with a certain shot. For example, if you notice that, I noticed that if I attack the outside lane on my brother, I'm constantly getting picked on the back body. Why is that happening? If we do this drill, it's like, pause. Oh, look at that. He's on the inside lane, he's got his cherry block, and he's already halfway to the shot. Of course he's picking my back body. So you can start blocking that out and working out why is something open when you do a certain action. So that way you can start thinking about how do I attack that outside arm, which is a really juicy target on him, without leaving that open. It's one of those like, well, if I throw over here, I see control of the inside lane, so maybe I can attack that target a little safer, like over here. And then suddenly, oh yeah, that target's covered now. Now he can't get there. What it's not useful for is blocking out an entire fight, because rarely does a block strike exchange last more than 3 to 4 shots on the outside. Usually they're 1 or 2. So trying to chest your way to a 15-shot combination probably isn't realistic. And I don't see a tremendous amount of value in it. So again, we'll block out shot, return, one more return, and then either we've reached a checkmate or we haven't. And at that point, most of the time people will reset. I find it's useful to do the drill hand match both sides and crossing. It's worth doing, again, maybe 1 to 2 minutes with each, and then walk through all combinations. From there, you can start going to I don't like half-speed block strike. I find that it's turns into sparring real quick. Because it's really hard to have the discipline of yourself to know that I'm moving at this speed, but if I moved at this speed, maybe I could get there, and then pretty soon my opponent's moving at this speed, and then pretty soon we're just sparring without moving our feet, and that's building bad habits. That said, doing 3, 4, 5 shot series with block strike is very useful. So once we've done our pause block strike, we'll go ahead and move on to, I'll go ahead and open. Done. Just 4 or 5 series, then we'll maybe switch hands. Something like that. And then once you've warmed up with that and worked out a couple of series and figured out if I do X, my opponent tends to do Y. If I do Y, my opponent tends to do Z. That sort of thing. Then you can start moving your feet around and actually doing some sparring. All right. This went a whole lot faster than I thought. Normally in person, getting to this point takes a good 40 minutes.
Oh.
Let's talk a little bit about board and applications with board. If you want to grab the small shell, I'll grab the medium. Okay. So for those who have fought me with sword and board before, I will freely admit that I'm a terrible sword and board fighter. My whole goal is to convince you to play single sword. If I can convince you to engage at a range and at an aspect, a relative angle, such that we're playing single sword instead of board, things generally go a lot better. So what that means is the way I line up, I usually have sword foot forward, I push my sword out, my single sword stance is right here, my board stance is here. All I'm doing is covering my inside lane with the shield. And hoping that dissuades you from attacking the inside lane at all. That way I get to cover my outside lane with my sword and throw essentially single sword shots targeting primarily your sword arm. And then from there, go ahead and bring up your gear. So my usual strategy again is to small feints and movements, trying to convince you to extend your sword past your shield, such that now you're well and truly playing with me. Because single sword, my usual targets are below your elbow on your arm, right? From here, out here, and from here. Once he's extended that arm out and given me access to it, suddenly we're playing single sword, which is a game I'm very comfortable and familiar with. Especially if I can step in a little bit. Once I've got his arm extended, mine isn't. Now I've got my inside lane covered, so I've got a very big advantage with this single sword. I can do all sorts of silly stuff like down here where my inside lane would be completely wide open, single sword. But with a shield in the way, suddenly I've got some kind of protection. For those who are actually good at board and have a clue how to play it, lane theory still does come into play. It's just a question of where do you place this nice big plane such that whatever lane you're giving up by attacking your opponent, for example, big wide wrap, cover the inside lane, or if you're coming with that nice big church of the high cross shot, your outside lane is wide open, so maybe shoot your shield over to cover it. Sort of a theory.
I haven't prepared anything. Fight theory, sword and board.
I just put my brother on the spot, who's not an instructor. So.
Yeah, I'm using the board to cover high probability targets. I tried to get some rounds in the opponent. I like to fight people where I've got, 10, 20 rounds to start to read them. So I can move the board a little bit more when I discover what they're looking at and where their high priority targets are. So when you move your board, you are not just covering your area, you are opening up other areas. So for instance, this seems like a very reasonable shot, right? I'm reaching for his shoulder, I'm covering my arm with my board. If he's close enough, or I know that he likes to get in to reach this back shoulder, this is a very bad plan. So you have to learn to read your opponents and discover when to cover which targets and when to just clear out. That's not a very coherent way of talking about that. I kind of just jumped into a topic without having any baseline to jump into it from.
Okay.
That made a ton of sense.
Excellent.
Thank you for that. So sparring with an opponent, I'll generally just dive in, throw whatever I feel like. We'll just play around a bit, and then win, lose, don't care for the first 10, 15, 20 rounds. Just feel out my opponent, see what they like, see if they've got something new to show me, and see where they like to hit. In a tournament, I have the exact opposite, where I'll start out at extreme range, and I'll throw very shallow, very safe shots, and I'll try to tease his hand a little bit. Maybe I'll show him a little bit of that hit, but I'll be doing it in such a way that I'm ready to spring back out of range, shoulder covered the whole time. And from there, I'm hoping to get responses out of it. So if I throw at this hand, what does he throw at me? Does he return to my arm? Or does he then rear back and try to throw deep shoulder? Does he try to drop his hand and stab? What does he do? Or does he try to lead? So I can start feeling out his response set from extreme range and relative safety before I actually move in and try to kill him. So same thing that does apply. It's just a question of, do you do it with 15 or 20 fights in a sparring series? Or do you do it from extreme range, staying very safe and using very small pieces of information to infer a lot more information? It all depends on what the stakes are in the fight. If you're sparring with somebody, there's no stakes. You can just have fun, enjoy yourself, and lose 15 out of the 20 first fights and it doesn't matter. Versus if it's tournament, this fight matters a lot. So you have to start out safe, stay as safe as you can, and hopefully achieve a victory without having to sacrifice or risk anything. Let's bust out a little bit of two sword. You go ahead and keep your board. I'll bust out a second sword because I actually know a little more about two sword. Okay. So lane control as applied to two sword. So there's two different guards that I like a lot. There's a couple more, a lot of different guards. A lot of people like a lot of different guards. The two that I've seen the most high-end two sword fighters use are the old road guard and the new road guard. So I'm going to go back to the old road guard because that's the one I learned first. What this is I'm going to hand match my opponent. So he's right-handed, he's got a shield in his hand, and his sword foot is forward. So I'm going to match his foot. Can't really see it, so my left foot, his right foot, both forward. And I'm going to match that leading hand. And then I'm going to take my other sword and I'm going to place it across my arm such that the point is ready for use and ready to come into the fight. And my hand is up close and relatively ready to come into the fight. But first priority is to close the inside leg. So if he decides to cross or throw it or my back body or something, I've got my right hand ready to stop it. And then my left hand has free shots because his sword is now occupied. Alternatively, if I'm the one that opens the fight, I can start doing things like this, where you guys see what I have or what I did? Probably not. Let's switch sides. Yeah, I can't see it through your shield. Okay, so I can try to do things like pin his sword with my forward weapon, or throw a shot such that if he doesn't cover it with his shield or move his hand significantly out of the way, he's going to just get hit. So I'm going to go for that shoulder and either cover with the shield or cover with the shoulder. Except we have to swap. All right. So from up here, his sword is now behind mine. No matter what he does, I've got a really good block on it with my forward hand. So at this point, I now have a free shot with my other hand. I said, the free shot can't be too intensive or too ridiculous. I have to be able to get back to guard within about a half second, in case he doesn't land or in case he has a trick up his sleeve. So, leading the fight, or again, fighting primarily single sword with that lead hand, ready to switch hands and throw a shot as soon as you burn a free shot with the rear hand. Or if he decides to commit deep and hard to the back body with either a shot or a stab, split that hand off, bury the sword, and now I've got free shots with the lead hand. The other guard, which is the new rogue guard, so I'm matching his feet again. So his sword puts forward, so my left foot will be forward. My right hand is in front of my left, and the sword's crossed in front. It looks like I'm blocking off my left hand, but you can still throw a pretty decent chop. As long as you keep careful track of where your sword tip is. The advantage here being, first off, it forces both of your hands to be in the fight. You can't engage until my right hand is in the fight, the rear hand, or the rear foot. And because my right hand is also my rear foot, that means my left hand is easily in range. So you must fight both of my hands at once rather than being able to isolate one of my hands and kill it. The other thing this does is, I'm going to go ahead and face the camera a little bit. From a sword and board perspective, if you see this guard, especially if I start floating my right hand down just a little bit, who here wants to throw at my right shoulder? Pretty much everybody, right? Looks really
Yeah, looks nice.
until my sword comes up, which is a pretty easy block. If you're sword and board, you just committed your sword and let me pin it against your board, and I'll get free shots to my left. If you're two sword and you throw with your forward hand, or I guess if you throw it honestly with either hand, so long as I can push or do a reasonably close block, it's relatively easy to pin both of your swords behind one of mine and gain a free shot with my left. The other nice thing about this guard is if my opponent starts trying to switch feet or something like that, and suddenly I have to readjust my whatever I'm doing, relatively easy to draw that hand back as you're taking a step back and go back to the old style rogue guard, which is a little more defensive and a little easier to block shots with. So this method is a little more offensive, forces both hands into the fight. You have to get a little closer to your opponent. But if you notice, there are a few more openings. It is a little easier to get hit around it. Versus this, a lot more defensive, pulls everything back a little more, and it closes the inside lane a little more thoroughly. And that's a good standoff guard where you're trying to clear out. All right, methods of getting your right hand into the fight. If your opponent is sword and board, and so if he's really good at shutting my left hand down and I'm getting nowhere, getting my left hand in, first thing I want to do is occupy his sword, right? So a lot of times I'll do that with a shot, but if he's doing that annoying thing where he's not even moving, clearly he's still chambers to hit me if I try to do anything with my right. A lot of times you can just preemptively block, put your sword across his, and then essentially force him into being blocked. And from there, you've got a free shot with your right. So a lot of times what I'll do for this guy is try to hit that money shot on his sword side hit. Go ahead and bring your guard back up. So I'll bring my right hand forward, bring my left stick across, throw down, right? So did everyone track that, or was that too? That's probably too quick. Drop that right tip. Throw up here. Basically target that shoulder. But I'm not really throwing a shot at the shoulder, forcing his sword behind mine, and then just complete the money shot. He tries to throw in the middle of this. I've already got my left hand in position to stop anything up to the inside lane. He throws to the outside lane. I'm not in as good a position, but the most he's going to get is maybe an arm. And I've got that tip all day. Essentially, I traded an arm for a kill, which isn't really what I want to do, but it's a lot better than losing.
A little bit about board versus two stick.
Yeah, please.
Uh,
Where do you want?
this is fine. I don't fight a lot of two sticks out on the West Coast, so you may wish to get more local advice. But I fight them almost exclusively positionally. I find that if I get close and start trying to beat them with sword work, they've got two swords and I lose. So what I'm watching when I fight a two stick is not just which arm they have forward, but which foot they have forward and how close to get a defeat are. I always, until I'm ready to try to beat them, I want to make sure I'm out of range of a sudden lunge. Because if they can close the range with me, they've got two sticks and I've got one, and they can start doing these tricks that Testocles has been talking about. So my goal is exactly what he said he's trying to prevent with his modified rub stance. I'm trying to stay out of range and isolate one of his arms, and I only move in when I'm confident that I can fight one of his arms without the other one. When is that? Is not a question I'm very good at answering. It's when one of his arms comes out or when he tries to make an attack, or if I can trick him and try to take that lunge, clearing range. Now I've got access to one of his arms and the other one can't reach me. So that's my general fight plan when I'm fighting against a two stick.
I really like that. Let's do that one a lot slower. Because I was watching the camera when it happened and it was just blank, blank, blank. Okay. So what he's doing is convincing me to attack, right? It's time for me to move in on him. So I step in, right? And he fades out with his rear foot. And it's not just stepping straight backwards, because if he stepped straight backwards, all he did was move the fight over here. He stepped offline towards my right-hand side, towards my rear foot. And now, it's hard to tell from the camera angle, but my left hand is effectively out of the fight. I can comfortably swing until about here. And you notice I'm not hitting him at all. My right hand is still in the fight. But at this point, it's my right hand against his sword and his shield. So he started into a fight of his two hands against my one.
Right? That's not a lot of specifics, but how I generally build my fight plan and making sure that they can't close the range until I want them to.
Versus my plan with two sword is to make sure that both of my swords stay in the fight. In fact, go ahead and grab a second sword. Let's talk a little bit about two sword on two sword. How lane control applies to that. Okay, so go ahead and bring up Take Either Guard. All right, beautiful. So from here, he's got his modified road guard. So he's trying to force both hands into the fight. But the first thing I noticed is he's not great at that guard. And you can't see it, but he's giggling and shaking his head. He's got his left hand well off to the side, well to the rear of his forward hand. And his sword blade is directly in the way of his knuckles. What this tells me is that he's a fighter who has seen this guard, but not a fighter who has ever used this guard. This also tells me his right hand is not in the fight, because if he tries to throw, he's going to block his own shot with his left. So only his left hand is fighting right now. So I'm actually going to use the modified road guard as well, because I'm actually hand matching him. The only hand that's in the fight is his left. So now it's my right hand essentially against his left. And if he ever gets wise, I want my left hand kind of chambered back here in case his right ever actually comes out and does something. Because the last thing I want to do is get shanked by somebody who's standing like this with two swords. All right. So how do I actually achieve that? Go ahead and bring up your guard again. You can fix it if you like.
I don't know if I can.
All right, fair enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show him some small shots to his right hand to see if he's just screwing with me and make sure that this really is how he wants to stand. And if he doesn't move or he just moves his feet, then it turns out, yeah, he really wants to fight like this. So at that point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to step in a little bit, show him a little bit of the threat with my right hand, and I'm going to gently push on his sword's point with my left. Can everyone see how this is looking? There's enough people in here now that my little screen is tiny, so I can't tell what's going on with it. Oh, that would be awesome. Oh, perfect. Now I can see what we're doing. All right. Okay. So I'm going to step in. I'm going to show him a little bit of a threat up here. And then I'm going to push with my left hand. See how I've got him pushed? See how his right hand is still trapped by his left. And now I've got some pressure on his left. This gives me about quarter to a half second of free shot with my right. So I could try to do some fancy big hook stab or something like that and make him regret the day he was born. But he's probably going to shoot his hand down and do something. There's a lot of stuff you can do about that. Or I can just roll over and pop his left arm. I isolated this arm, and now I've killed him. Now I have two swords against his one. All right, go ahead and take a more comfortable guard. All right, so if he's using the old style road guard, this is looks a little more comfortable for him. He looks like he's a little more competent with it. This tells me he's elected to fight with his right hand, and his left hand is being reserved primarily for defense. His goal is going to be to try to get in to where his left hand can threaten me as well. And my goal is going to be to try to change the fight to where both of my hands are now in range of his one, and now his left hand can't reach me. So I can either do that by trying to change the angle of the fight such that his rear hand can no longer reach, or convincing him that both of his hands are in range when only one in fact is. One of my, again, using this guard right here, can do that. Especially if I'm only throwing with my right to start out with. This can lead a lot of opponents to believe that maybe I have no confidence in my left, or maybe I don't have range with my left. So then he might start getting comfortable and actually reaching out and throwing with his right at this range, when I can disabuse him of that motion. Does that all kind of make sense? It was a little all over the place. I think we had.
Yeah, it all tracks. I dig it.
Okay. So, there's been one common theme with all of this two-sword talk, and I don't know if anybody's picked up on it or not, but in person I'd make somebody try to answer me, but since that's been really awkward so far, I'll just give it to you. How many body shots have I thrown at it? Pretty much zero, right? What I've found with two-sword is trying to throw from my opponent's body, unless I've got a very careful setup and I'm very sure of my read. If I can reach his body with either one of my swords, it's a guarantee that both of his are in the fight. And body shots against the two-sword are relative. Go ahead and bring up your guard. Even if I can sneak something through around his guard, it's not terribly difficult for one of the swords to block. And generally speaking, once he's got that block, let's go ahead and squat just a little bit. His sword is still kind of in the fight, and it's still available to throw, versus mine is extended pretty awkwardly. So in order to get to his body around all of these teeth that he's got out here, I have to sacrifice quite a bit of control. Like, am I in control of either lane at this point? Not really. You can get to either side of my arm. So this sword that I'm attacking with is no longer being defensive. It's purely offensive. So I'm banking on one of my swords being enough defense to counteract both of his while I'm doing a Hail Mary for it. Versus if I'm attacking his arms, I can maintain good lane control, right? So from here, I can attack right there. I've got control of his left sword his right sword with my left. It's going to force him to the outside lane with that one. And I've got really good outside lane control with this hand right here that's wiggling. And my inside lane is still covered by my right. So if he decides to bring his left hand into the fight, I've still got a defensive option. Or if he doesn't, or if he does the traditional new player thing of flinging it back and trying to get it out of his way, Then I've got attack options as well, right? Or better yet, safe attack options, which don't sacrifice that inside leg. So if I go for that body, even if his hand's well back, he might still flail and get something. Versus if I attack here, if he tries to flail, I've still got inside lane control with my right hand. Or outside, depending on how you think of it. All that kind of makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, we've got about 15 minutes left of class time. Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody want to see it closer in more detail?
I mean, you seem to have gone over it all really well.
Thank you. That was a little bit challenging not being able to see anybody's faces, because I usually look at people's faces for understanding, and I don't have that right now. All I've got is a bunch of cool icons.
Testocles, what is like a few tips you would give beginner to intermediate fighters on like basic routines? Like, you're going to go work the Pel today. What would you suggest?
So working the Pel, I'm not a huge fan of the 1-2 drills. Personally, I like to work a step and a shot rather than just working from one shot to another. What I found is shot combinations are a lot less valuable than step and shot combinations. So if my brother's going to be my Pel for a moment, go ahead and stand here. That way you can see, rather than working, shoulder hip, because the likelihood of throwing that in a fight is pretty low. I'm going to work step to the side, shoulder. I'm going to work step to the side, attack the shoulder with a different shot. Step to the side, attack shoulder with a third shot. And those 3 shots are going to be attack with a reverse wrap, attack with a flat wrap, attack with a chop. And then step to the inside, attack the hip. Step to the inside, reverse wrap, the inside flat wrap. So basically work on attacking each target with each of the general types of shot. Those are the 3 I use. And work on stepping to different locations. The other thing to do when you're stepping to that location is see how safe it is. I like to have a mirror behind my Pel. That way I can watch the guy in the mirror, and if I step across my Pel like this, and I try to throw this shot, where does that leave me? Well, looking at the mirror, the guy in the mirror has all sorts of stuff open. Versus what if I step over here and attack like this? The guy in the mirror has a little bit open, but a lot less open. So it's still not the safest shot, maybe not the best idea, but it's a better idea than over here. I can talk about breaking down Pel work if you like. Please do. My brother's done a lot more Pel work than I have, so I'm kind of a slacker.
When I am working with a Pel, I like to break down my motions into the footwork first, the one of my hands and the footwork second, then the footwork and both of my hands third. So to start out with, I plan out how far I would start from the Pel and where I want to step to. And I just practice that very slowly, trying to maintain control at all points of step. And when I'm comfortable with that, I pick up my board or my off sword or whatever, my defensive equipment. I practice board position while I'm going to throw. Say if I wanted to throw for his shoulder with a lateral step to his left side. I practice the step first, then I practice. Then I would practice the step with an arm cover. I shield there, and watch the guy in there, figure out what you look like when you need to cover. And then I would pick up the sword and practice roll very slowly until I'm doing one of these. And I would do that slowly until I was confident that I had the motion right. Then I would pick it up to a very relaxed medium speed. I try to get about 10 times in a row with a very comfortable correct shots before moving up to the next speed. But that's up to you. If you get bored more easily than I am, don't do that.
I'm the type of guy that gets bored almost immediately, so I have to try a shot fast, see if it feels good. If it doesn't, then I can break it down. Because once it felt bad, then it's worth it to me to do the work. If it doesn't feel bad, then I just work it fast.
So I just break it down into its components: the feet, the arms, and then the speed. I just pick up the speed as I get more comfortable with the shot. So eventually I'm practicing the full speed thing with the step. And it's not just important to practice the step from the throw, you must also practice your exits. So I'm going to step, throw, and return to guard. That return to guard is very important because what you do when you're practicing is what you will do when you're fighting. So if you don't practice the return to guard, you're going to be leaving your arms hanging out there a lot when you're fighting.
Thank you. That's a huge part of fighting. So the way I kill new fighters in tournaments is I don't open them unless they're standing horribly and have something wide open. For example, go ahead and grab that board again and face the camera with it. Back up one more step. If I see this during a tournament, I'm not going to open. If I see this during a tournament, I'll open on a brand new fighter. If I see this during a tournament, I can just hit his shoulder with essentially zero risk. Because from here, from my guard, I lower my tip, and there's the shot. I didn't change my guard. But if I see that during a tournament with a new fighter, I don't have a free shot on him. I would have to come out of guard or try to convince him to move his equipment. A brand new fighter, often enough, will not move their equipment because they don't know what they're looking at. They don't know how to read. So they're just going to stand there like, he's moving. Wonder what's going on. And then they're going to do whatever they wanted to do anyway. And sometimes what they want to do anyway is actually a pretty decent plan. So what I'll do with new fighters is I'll let them open. I'll let them move their equipment for me. And once I've seen a couple openers, especially if they do the same thing more than once, then I get to hit them. Especially if they don't return to guard. So if you don't practice that return to guard step, and you leave your equipment wherever you finished your shot at, unless you finished your shot from guard, then a more experienced opponent will block your shot and then kill you for throwing.
So color routine, in short, to answer your question, is a step, a shot, and a return to guard.
All right, one more thing that I totally forgot to cover during the single sword portion. Go ahead and grab your single sword again. Safe openers. For this one, we're going to want to get fairly close to the camera so that they can actually see what's going on. Okay, so why I showed you 3 different shots, I realized just now I completely forgot to tell you why I like practicing all 3 shots at each different location. So from this position, if I want to attack the outside of his arm, if I attack with a chop, it did not land, right? Because chops don't have a lot of angle to them. They're not a great shot. If I throw it really hard, maybe I landed, maybe I hurt my friend, maybe I busted my brother's knuckles, whatever. Either way, I probably didn't land. And how easy is his return shot to throw? Pretty easy, right? He's got a lot of real estate, a lot of places to go. Let's go like half a step. There we go. Now we can kind of see shoulders. Okay. If I throw the flat wrap, gives me a lot of angle, real likely to land. What if he blocks? See how easy that block was? Still pulled my shot off of him. And look at how much real estate he has to throw back at, right? He's got all of this. And my block, in order to stop his shot, I have to go from here, clear back over to here to stop his return. Especially if I throw from too close of a range and he's got access to back body. Now I have to come clear across here before I'm safe. So how do I end up in the block from this position? How do I attack that same target and wind up in a good block? I throw the reverse. Gives me a good shot. And I don't know if you can hear that or not, but there's a pretty good pop there. I actually landed that one. Pretty happy. And from here, he's throwing straight into my guard. So that's what I would call a safe opener. I throw an opener such that his return is already blocked or close to blocked. If I want to attack the inside lane, if I throw that reverse, he's got all kinds of real estate if he blocks. He's got the outside of arm. Let's switch hands. So if I throw the inside, or the flat wrap to the inside, see how he's got all that real estate on the outside of my arm? Versus if I throw the flat wrap to the inside, he's got a little bit, but my arm's behind my hand. He can't get through that. And if he wants to get to my body, he's going to have to reach for it. Well, right now he's not going to have to step forward so you can see, but in a real fight, he's going to have to reach to get in it. And if he does, it's a pretty easy block, right? It doesn't take a lot of motion on my part. And if he does reach for it, go ahead and reach for it. It gives me really juicy returns to the inside of his arm or even his body if he leans. So that's what I mean by safe opener. The thing to concentrate on here is throw a shot and a block at the same time. Now, sometimes.
Hey, Al.
Yeah.
You got about 5 minutes left. You got to wrap it up. Give the next teacher time to prep for their class.
Cool. All right, last concept here. I'll go ahead and bring your back up. So, if you notice that your opponent refuses to engage with you and you throw a shot and a block at the same time, chances are your block is too good. So what you can start doing is instead of throwing a really strong block, you can throw a slightly weaker block, opening up a target that you want them to throw at. For example, if I wanted to throw back body, I might throw with my block a little bit low and make that back body real inviting. And maybe he goes for it. Or I might throw with that block really high and maybe he tries to snag my elbow. And if I can get my arm out of the way in time, maybe that gives me a lane transit. He whips. Or if he doesn't, maybe I can catch something and chop his arm, so on and so forth. Options are endless. The big thing is make sure you have a shot and a block at the same time. The board and the two sword give you the opportunity to achieve that block with a different piece of equipment. But that theory remains the same throughout. Kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right, any last second questions?
When do you high cross?
There's a time and a place, and I have not found it yet. Now, I actually do like high cross as an opener or as a range closer with sword and board. Go ahead and grab your board real quick.
Oh, God.
Best time for high cross is after the first 3 high crosses.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So ignore my terrible shield position. I've only got one strap on. We've got like 30 seconds. Bring your equipment up. If I want to close on him, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a high cross as I'm stepping, right? Let's switch sides so that you can see what I'm doing here. Okay. So if I just step in on him, he's got the opportunity to do whatever he wants with the sword, right? Versus if I throw a high cross as I'm stepping in, I'm forcing him to keep that sword up in that position. So I know exactly where he's at and exactly what he's doing for about the next half second to a full second because my sword's in his way, and if he didn't block that shot, he was going to die, or at least lose the sword. So that's what I use high crosses, closing with board. That
Awesome.
said, I do not expect it to land. I'm just trying to make him not hit me back. Any more last minute questions? Going once, going twice. So, thank you for attending my class. It was a real pleasure having you guys here. Hope you learned something.